So hello and welcome to the second episode of 1,000 Paths to a Career in Arbitration, everyone. I'm Mandy Lee, the founder of Careers in Arbitration. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're tuning in after watching our first episode, we are delighted to have you here today. Now, before I turn the floor over to our host with the most, let me make one small housekeeping point. We are recording this webinar. We ask all participants to kindly make sure that their microphones and videos are switched off during the webinar. The networking session, which will follow the webinar, will not be recorded. And so you'll all have the opportunity to turn your cameras on then, but we want to begin by focusing on our speakers. So thank you all very much for respecting this request. Let's move on then to more important matters. Now, after all, you're not here to listen to me. I have the pleasure of introducing Jessica Rado, the architect and host of our fabulous webinar series. Jessica obtained her LLM from Fordham Law School and is a New York-based litigation associate, albeit she's presently speaking to us from Italy. She's a passionate Viz-Moot coach, my goodness, I can't speak today, and an active participant in numerous ADR committees and organizations, both in the US and internationally. She's been a keen supporter of Careers in Arbitration for quite a while now, having helped us to organize our first ice cream themed meetup in the US. And we are delighted that she brought this series to us. And so without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mandy, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am just going to give a brief overview of the series and what 1,000 Paths to a Career in Arbitration is all about, and then I will move on to introduce our wonderful guests. So as the title suggests, what we try to do with the series is to show that although arbitration seems a very competitive field and it can seem very hard to get into it sometimes, there's no one and only path to get there, but there's perhaps even 1,000. And so for every episode, we are inviting two speakers who have something in common, whether they have the same background, they went to the same law school, or they're working in the same position, but they also have a very different story. And we're going to ask them some questions to see how each of them got there, what they think worked for them, what didn't, and if they have any tips or suggestions for young practitioners who are trying to break into this field. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the guest for today's episode, which is going to be about what does it mean to work as a foreign associate in international arbitration. Maybe sometimes you've seen it on LinkedIn, you see international associate, foreign lawyer, foreign consultant, and you're wondering, what does that really mean? Are you an associate? Are you not an associate? Is it only, do you need to be barred? Do you have to be barred somewhere else? Our guests will help clear this up for us today. So our guests today are Ljubica Kaurin-Dragićević. Ljubica is currently working as a visiting foreign consultant at WilmerHale in London. She pursued her LLB in Bosnia and her LLM at UCL in London, and she's currently working on her bar admission in the UK. And then we have Édgar Eduardo Méndez Zamora. He's currently working as a foreign associate at Chaffetz Lindsay in New York City. After practicing for several years in international arbitration in Costa Rica, Eduardo obtained his LLM at Harvard Law, and he is qualified to practice law in Costa Rica and is expected to be sworn into the New York bar this fall. So let's begin. First and foremost, welcome to our guests. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I am going to dive right into it. I'm going to start asking you some questions to understand what these roles actually mean. Let's start with Ljubica. Ljubica, you are working as a visiting foreign consultant. Can you tell us what this role means?
Hello, hi. Thank you very much, Mandy and Jessica and Careers in Arbitration for having me. Yes, as rightly introduced, I am a visiting foreign consultant at WilmerHale. Visiting foreign consultant and visiting foreign lawyers are roles that are quite specific to International Arbitration Group of WilmerHale. So they are unique, so to say, to the firm. But in essence, I would say the similar roles exist in other firms, in other jurisdictions as well. And those roles are called international associate, visiting associate, summer associate, and so on. In terms of the role that I'm currently in, it is in hierarchy, I would say, at WilmerHale, it's a role between intern and associate. And I would say that the workload also covers partly both of these roles. If you're wondering what the difference is between visiting foreign consultant and lawyer, it's just a different title for the people who have qualification, who have a bar. So those who have a bar are visiting foreign lawyers. Both roles are paid roles, of course, and they're fixed time roles. And they're normally promotion from an intern role at WilmerHale after being an intern for 6 months. So that's a bit about it. I understand that my co-guest Eduardo might have different experiences, but the roles as they are introduced in different firms do not often, at least from my experience, mean the same thing. So I guess that's what we're gonna discuss about today as well. Again, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start right away with Eduardo. Eduardo, you are a foreign associate, so it's a different title. Is it basically the same position, or are there some different features in your experience at Chaffetz Lindsay?
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Amanda and Careers in Arbitration for having me. So yes, I am currently occupying the position of foreign associate at Chaffetz Lindsay in New York, and I would have to start by saying that these positions are difficult to define or to generalize for the whole market. Each law firm has its own characteristics and assigns a particular role to these different positions of foreign consultants or foreign attorneys or foreign lawyers, etc. Of course, I'm gonna share with you my experience and some experience that I've heard from people who are friends or colleagues and who have also occupied these positions in other law firms here in the US. Now, a foreign attorney or a foreign associate is usually a person who is barred or qualified to practice law in a foreign jurisdiction, not in the US, or is expected only to be qualified in a foreign jurisdiction when being hired for the position, and is in the US to practice law usually for a short period of time, like not necessarily short, but a defined period of time. It's usually a year. It could be a bit more. Like I said, it's difficult to generalize because I've also heard of people who get a position as foreign associates in the US permanently. But it's usually that. Now, a foreign associate has very similar, or if not the same, responsibilities as a regular associate. Now, it of course depends on how much experience you have, so that will determine how much responsibility you will get. But it is, at the end of the day, very similar in terms of responsibility and usually in compensation as well.
All right. That's good to know, especially about the compensation. I'm sure everybody was looking forward to that. So as a first started, it sounds like all these titles are, as Eduardo said, it's hard to generalize because every firm has different conditions and different terms and everything. But it sounds like at the end of the day, they're pretty much the same job. So you're a foreign attorney. If you're barred in a foreign jurisdiction, you're going to be defined as an associate. If you're not barred, you might be defined as a consultant. And it can be international associate, international lawyer, visiting attorney, visiting lawyer. But at the end of the day, you're going to be doing kind of associate work. You're going to be kind of one of the associates at the firm. The terms can be different. Eduardo mentioned that it can be fixed term or it can be permanent. Just for in case we have some attendees that are interested in pursuing an LLM in the US, what ends up happening, and Eduardo knows this very well, you might be able to obtain this position for the terms of your OPT, which is a 1-year work visa that you're giving after the LLM. So that's one thing that can happen. And after that, like our guests say, it really depends on the firm. But since careers in arbitration is also very followed for all the vacancies that are shared on the feed, I'm sure our attendees are going to want to know, how do I find this position? Is it going to pop up on LinkedIn, or how do I get myself a job as an international associate? So let's start with Ljubica. How did you get this position for yourself?
So as mentioned earlier, this role normally at MillerHale is a step up from an intern role. So you are usually hired by a firm as an intern, and then you spend usually 6 months with the firm before you apply for this role. So the role itself is not advertised publicly. However, the intern role and the intern program is, and I'm just going to share in the chat the link with the more information in case someone's interested in that. Occasionally, though, people who have a lot of experience and are looking to switch jurisdictions, or people who are needed for a specific matter, be it due to their specific experience or specific language skills, are taken directly, but that there is a separate procedure that is not advertised for that. In my case, I was interned with the firm back in 2020. After I switched to another firm for a year or so to complete my qualifying work experience, which was required for my English qualification. And after that, I reapplied, that is to say, for this role, and returned to firm while I'm awaiting for my bar exam results. So that's in short how Wilmer does it.
Okay. And what about you, Eduardo? How did you get your position at Chaffetz Lindsay?
Well, what I did a master's program, as you mentioned before, in 2021, graduating in 2022, which would be last year. What I did is, as soon as I got into the program, as soon as I started doing intensive networking to reach out to different firms who I know are well regarded in the field of arbitration and with whom I would like to work. And one of them was, of course, Chaffetz Lindsay. So I reached out to them. I sent them an email. I did have some prior connections that tied me to some of their partners, not directly, but indirectly. And I think that was valuable. And well, I got a reply from them and a request for an interview. So that's how it all started, of course. I had a couple of interviews, and that led to eventually an offer.
Okay. Well, we sort of touched this already, but just so we can give some more, let's say, specific advice to our attendees. So there is this whole fear of cold emails. Cold emails can be really good, or they can backfire. They can just be annoying to the recipient. So in your experience for the positions you have applied so far, even if it's not for specifically the one you had, do you think that for such a role, a cold email might be effective, or do you think that a prior connection is what you actually need in order to obtain this position, or to at least obtain an answer and be giving an interview? Let's start again with Ljubica. What do you think about cold emails here?
Yeah, so I think cold emails can work, but you have to do your best to make them work. I think they would work if they are first sent to the right addressee, and second, if they are very well thought through and well drafted. So on the first point, when you're writing a cold email, it is really, really important to conduct a thorough research, background research to the firm, to the person, to the work they do, to be able to properly identify the best addressee for whatever your request is. A lot of times I heard from LLM students who, let's say, switch jurisdictions, are new to a certain jurisdiction. They heard about a firm and they immediately start cold emailing managing partners of the firm. And then, of course, get a bit disappointed when they do not receive a response. While I think the well-drafted email might work sometimes, even with those people, unfortunately, in most of the cases, perhaps because they're super busy or are not at all in charge of recruitment, those people will not reply to those emails, unfortunately. So the first point, very, very important point, is to find the right addressee. And then on the second point, I think it's important to tailor the email to the specific firm and addressee, of course, and be very clear about your questions or requests. If you're being vague about the purpose of your email, I think there is less chance to receive an answer, even if ultimately you actually did a good job and identified a proper or the best addressee that you could. If you're not really clear about what you want, people tend to, not reply. So I think if you do your best and, send it to the right addressee and do a really good background research, including being very clear about what you actually want, I think that could definitely work.
That sounds like great advice. And thank you, Mandy, who is recording all of our great tips that our speakers are giving out. So in the chat, you can find all of the suggestions that have been made so far. Mandy is recording them for us. So even though Eduardo already told us, how he got his position, I'm still going to ask you if you think a cold email might still be effective, or if you think the prior connection is what you actually need to make the email effective.
So I do think cold emails can be effective, and I believe that the advice that Ljubica has given you is very valuable, and I agree with all of her points. Now, I do think that when you draft your email that has to be tailor-made for the law firm, you should be careful to include your strongest attributes first, like something that catches the person's attention, because they'll be receiving so many emails from so many people that you want to stand out in a way. Now, if you have someone who, if you have some sort of prior connection with the firm, then mention it up front, so that it doesn't get buried somewhere in the text that follows, and so that that can catch the attention of the reader. And if you have someone who is also, if you've worked with someone in the past who is well regarded in the field, or in general as a lawyer, and who is endorsing your application, or who would be willing to vouch for you, then also you could, with their permission, of course, mention this at first. So the thing with a cold email is you have to be very strategic in making yourself different from the rest.
Okay, well, this sounds all like great advice. So now I hope our attendees now have an idea of how to structure their cold email, because Ljubica is giving us very specific tips on how to structure and the research to do prior. And Eduardo has told us, put your strongest assets first and make the reader interested in what you have to say. So let's say we do send the email and the email is effective and we get offered an interview. What kind of questions do you think you're going to be asked for this kind of position? Or if you remember what you were asked, not the specific, question by question kind of thing, but are they going to be technical questions to test your knowledge in the field of arbitration? Or are they more general about, your course of studies, your plans, and what you actually want to do with your career? What has been your experience so far? Let's start with Eduardo this time.
All right. So I did not get any interviews. I did participate in several interviews, but I did not get technical questions in any of them. I didn't get substantive arbitration related questions. This doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but I think it's not what the firms are interested in asking most frequently. What I did notice that they were interested in was the person's experience. If they have practiced arbitration before, if so, what were the cases? What was the applicable law? What were the facts? Of course, you have to be very careful not to reveal any confidential information, and they are not expecting you to do it. But they will ask, for example, the type of arbitration that it was, what role you played in this arbitration, how it unfolded, what was maybe the applicable law, and that is something that I believe is most valuable to them, because they want you to be able to hit the ground running and be a valuable asset to the team. And if you do have that experience, I think it will add to your value as a professional. They do also ask what your plans are. It's something that I recommend you are very transparent on, this is not precisely related to the interview, but I did notice that like firms usually ask for example, writing samples and of course your CV and your transcripts as well. So it's important that you do a good job in law school. And they also ask why you are interested in a specific firm. Like in that specific firm, why them and not some other firm? So that's something that I think relates to what Ljubica was saying before, of really doing your homework and researching the firm and knowing what they specialize on and why they are so good at what they do. That will, of course, leave a good impression and let them know that you really have an interest in them. And with regards to the transcripts, they may ask as well after they receive them, your law school transcripts, why you took certain classes and why you did not take others, and maybe what you learned. So those, I think, are the main topics that are discussed in interviews from my experience.
Okay, well, lots of stuff there to take away. Same question for you, Ljubica. What kind of questions have you experienced in arbitration?
Yes, so I think Eduardo covered, I would say, most of it. Of course, it's always about your personal motivation, long-term plans. That's always going to play a role in an interview. Some firms do really like to dwell on that. Some others to just mention it for the sake of, asking. But I think it also depends on what you want from that role, which I think we will discuss maybe later at the event. But in any case, yes. So personal motivation, long-term plans, CV-based questions, including arbitration-related experience, if you had any. And for this role, I think you should have at least some. And then through that, I think substantive questions can crop up through your personal experience. Of course, as Eduardo mentioned, you should be super careful not to reveal any confidential information. But for example, if you have worked on an investment treaty case, which, the award is published, the proceedings are over, you can mention some things. The best is to keep it very general, discuss substantive legal issues without mentioning how they applied in a particular case to factual scenarios. And then, of course, for a couple of roles that I applied to, I was asked to submit a writing sample. I submitted my LLM thesis, and I did get a few questions on that. So associates and partners who interview in some firms do actually set aside their time to read your writing samples and ask questions. So, but then again, I would say that's still really good because they're asking you about something that you put in a lot of effort into, and you should probably be able to address all those questions. So it's sort of there are no expectation, and there are no like surprise questions or something that you would not be able to answer. But yeah, I think those are most of the questions that I had or heard other people having during interviews.
That's a really good point about the writing sample, because sometimes we're so used to having a writing sample ready to go, and when they ask you, you just attach it and you send it over. But it's good to read it before you do, because you might want to freshen up and remember what it was actually about, because you might get some questions about that. And it's of course nice to see that they actually read it and they're interested and they want to know more about why you decided to write it or what it was about. So that's really good to know. I'm going to dig a little deeper into something that you both touched upon already. Sometimes when you're a foreigner, you might want to go to a specific country, a specific jurisdiction, gain some experience, but you already know that you want to go back. And you both mentioned that it is going to be, subject of questions. What is your actual long-term plan? What do you plan on doing? So if you've been asked whether, Ljubica, when you wanted to stay in London, and Eduardo, whether you wanted to stay in New York, or if you had already plans to go back, how did you handle that question? Meaning, were you straightforward? Did you just say, yes, I want to stay, this is what I want to do? Did you try to play it cool? Or how do you think is the best way to approach that kind of question? Let's start with Eduardo again.
Of course, thanks. So I think the best thing you can do is first of all, have a plan, I would say, because some people don't know what they want, which is, it's okay. But when you are applying to a law firm, they usually expect you to know at least what you want to do in the short or medium term. And on top of everything, I would say you should be as honest as possible. If you, for example, know that you want to stay in the US for 1 year, maybe 2, maybe 3, but no more than that, and I would say go ahead and say it. If you would just want to be working for them for 1 year, go ahead and say it. Because I think that reflects very well on who you are. And if you are not completely transparent and things go in a way that exposes your lack of honesty, then that will reflect very bad on you. So I don't think there's a single recipe on apart from honesty, and you shouldn't be afraid of saying, for example, I just want to be here for 1 year, because there's many firms that are actually looking for that. They're looking for a person. Actually, the Foreign Associate Program and the International Visiting Lawyer Program in many firms is designed to have a person there for a limited period of time, usually 1 year, to build connections with their home jurisdictions. So that's something that's perfectly fine. And if you also plan to stay for longer, go ahead and say it, because then they can tell you whether that's an option, whether that's something they do or if they don't. Because if they don't, and it's definitely what you want to do, then you might want to reconsider that position.
Sounds very interesting. It's all very good points. Ljubica, what's your take on this?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think this role is unique in that sense that it offers flexibility. And as we were not able to really sort of articulate the definition of this particular role across jurisdictions and across firms, I think in the same way, we would not be able to really define it in terms of like what it can offer to a single person. So I think, particularly at WilmerHale, but I think at other firms as well, the role allows you to turn turn it into whatever you want it to be. There is a possibility to, advance, be promoted basically in advance into an associate role, transition into an associate role. But there is also an option for you just to stay like 3-6 months and return. And both options are valid and are basically up to you and your plans. So I understand that's how it is at WilmerHale, but I would assume in any other firm as well, particularly because this role is unique in that sense that it's not really strictly defined, such as an associate role. Because let's say if you're applying for an associate role where they're really looking for a person with particular language skills, with a particular experience, because they have long-term plans for you, because maybe they have now, like, let's say 5 cases which require, Spanish speaking person. Then, if you're going to stay there for like 3 months and want to go, it doesn't look the best if you try to conceal that during the interview. So that's where I think you should be sort of thinking more clearly in your about your own sort of plans for the future. But I think for these roles, anything works as long as you're honest, and as long as you really you don't have to have everything sorted. But even if you have a plan to stay for 3 months, and you might want to say, I want to stay for 3 months, see if this works for me, if I like the work and so on, and then I might want to stay more. So just being honest, I agree with Eduardo 100% is the best policy.
Sounds like our guests are in agreement. Honesty is key. Just tell the firm what you want to do, and it sounds like the position is flexible enough that there should be room for everyone. And if there isn't, maybe it's just not a good match, but it might work out at a different firm that's looking for the person who stays a year or wants to stay for a longer time. So let's not conceal our intentions, but let's just talk with the firm and see what the best fit would be. We're almost at the end of our discussion here. I want to take just one moment to talk about LLMs in general. A lot of aspiring arbitration practitioners pursue LLM degrees in different jurisdictions. And my question to you is, what role do you think your postgraduate qualifications played in you obtaining these roles? Did you feel like your employers were interested in your LLM degree? Did you think they value it as an asset when they were deciding whether to hire you or not? And if so, do you think it does actually make the difference? Meaning, if you don't have an LLM, do you think such a position might be precluded to you, or based on your experience, based on your colleagues and what you've seen so far? Let's start with Ljubica this time.
So it's a tricky one, I would say, but from my personal experience, I think having LLM while looking for these positions was very helpful, but I wouldn't say it was absolutely necessary. I think, and this is something that Eduardo referred to at the beginning of this event, you need to network and you need to meet people in jurisdiction where you are looking to find this role in. And in order to do that, you ideally need to be present, right? And you need to figure out how things work, because things work differently in different jurisdictions, different people are in charge. Especially if you're starting off as a junior person, you need to know, for example, in the UK, they have trainees. There is a training program that's completely separate thing from what we are discussing right now. So you need to sort of be able to really understand the market. And I think that's best done in person and by talking to people. And of course, I think, many people, myself included, would not have that chance if they haven't stayed for a year to do their LLM in a certain jurisdiction. I think LLM experience, if it's arbitration focused, is an added bonus, and you will definitely be asked about it. But otherwise, I think it's more, of course, from the academic side, you may want get what you want from that. But in terms of getting hired, I don't think it necessarily plays the role, at least from my experience.
Okay. What about you, Eduardo? What's your take?
Well, I agree definitely with Ljubica that it's not something that's required. It's not something that you have to have. But I do believe that in my case, it was pivotal. I think they valued a lot the fact that I had just gotten experience here in the US, doing a master's program, learning about international arbitration, and it also helps them, I believe, get a sense of your qualifications as well, and of what type of professional you are. So, for example, one of the meetings I had was with a partner that also graduated from the Harvard LLM program some years ago, of course, and I think that helped to build a connection. I do think that an LLM program puts you at a significant advantage when trying to apply for these jobs.
All right, so it sounds like it could be very useful, can make a difference, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite, or it could be not a deal breaker, let's put it like that, but it does help in specific contexts. So
yes. Maybe if I can add something there, I have seen that some people that do foreign associate, get foreign associate positions that haven't recently done an LLM, or that haven't gotten that position because of their LLM, could sometimes be because they work at law firms who in a certain way collaborate with the law firm that is offering them this position. So that might be another way to get into a foreign associate position that's not like the typical route of going to the US or to whatever country, getting an LLM and then applying. So that's something that I've seen happen as well.
And maybe just to add one more thing, I think it also matters what your home jurisdiction is, basically what your home LLB, where your LLB is from. Because if you have, I would say your bachelor studies, if you've done your bachelor studies in arbitration-friendly jurisdictions and jurisdictions which are, I'm lacking the exact term, but I would say that the ones that are most sought after, I think you have better chances to get whatever you want without LLM. But if you do not have such a degree, then I think LLM is it's a way for you to get your foot at the door for sure.
Great. Okay, now let's move on to bar qualifications. So we've heard that both of you are working on your bar admissions in New York and London, respectively. My question to you is, was this a topic of discussion with your current employers? Did they ask you to eventually complete the bar admission locally, or did it not come up at all? Were they simply interested to know if you had plans for it or not? And just generally, how did you approach this kind of issue, if it came up at all during your interviews? Let's start with Ljubica.
Yeah, so for me, it's quite specific because I already started my qualification path before joining Wilmer, but I don't think there is a requirement to have a English bar for this role in particular. But then again, it is really a market expectation. So if you are going to be looking for associate roles later in England, you do know that that's what you have to do. So it's it's not required, but it's expected, so to say. So a lot of VFLs and visiting foreign lawyers and visiting foreign consultants who do have intention of staying in England and building their career in England do ultimately decide to take that exam.
And what about you, Eduardo?
Yes, I think it's a very similar situation to the one described by Ljubica. in the different interviews that I had, the law firms did ask the question of whether I was planning to take the bar. They did show interest in that fact, but they usually didn't require it for the foreign associate position. For example, here at Chaffetz Lindsay, it's not required to have the bar, because this is something that I should correct from something I said before, and it's that well, you usually stay here in the U.S. for 1 year. You are barred in a foreign jurisdiction, but since it's international arbitration, you are not practicing law, because per se, you are practicing international arbitration. You're part of a team that's practicing international arbitration, so you are not required to have it. But as Ljubica said before, if you do have the plan or the expectation to stay for a longer period of time, at least here in the U.S., even if you're doing international arbitration, which does not always or usually, at least here, require being part of the bar, you should consider doing the bar, because big firms and some boutique firms as well have the policy of hiring only people who are barred, even if they don't, like, strictly needed for the exercise for practicing international arbitration.
Okay, so it sounds like in both scenarios it's not required, but it's kind of good to have it. So it's good to work on it. All right, we are almost done with our questions. I just want to ask you a more personal question, let's say, to wrap this up. Can you tell us what you really like about your current positions, whether you like the firm, the environment, you like the people, you like the city you're at, or you like flexibility or something? What would you say are 3 things that you like the most of your current role? Ljubica?
I would say my top 3 things would be, of course, intellectually challenging work that I get to do on the daily basis. And I would say that, once you're there, I don't think you would have any day that is the same to the previous one. You're very often required to think outside of the box, to find solutions that are not so conventional. And I think I really, really like that aspect of the job. Then I really like teamwork, and I think that's inevitable in working in large law firms. I think that's something that's a given. And you are like, I like the feeling of being able to contribute to the final product, but also at the same time being able to learn from my colleagues and the work that they are doing. And finally, I think this is why I actually chose this path and chose international arbitration. I really enjoy cultural and intellectual diversity that it offers. I really like working with colleagues from all over the world and learning about them, about their cultures and their legal cultures. And that's really something that colors my day every day in the office.
That sounds great. Eduardo, what about you?
Thank you. So I would say one of the things I like the most about Chaffetz Lindsay is the environment, the firm environment. This is a place where you feel respected all of the time. There's a lot of respect going on. At least in my experience, I have always been treated very well, even if tension is high. And I've seen that happen. I've seen others have the same experience. So that is definitely something I value a lot. I have worked in 2 or 3 law firms since I started working in law, And I believe this is a fundamental requisite to be happy in the workplace, and to be able to be as productive as you can while having a good time, even if you have a lot of work, because that's mostly a given for international arbitration. You'll be working a lot, so might as well be, you know, having a good time in the process. I suspect this is also related to the fact that it's a boutique firm. So you know, we're not that many, 30 or 40 people, and we all know each other, and that adds to a personal touch to coming to the office and to sharing with others. So that's definitely the first thing I very much like about this place. The second would be how work is distributed. As a foreign associate, I've had the opportunity of focusing exclusively on international arbitration, both commercial and investment. And I have been assigned to one or two cases throughout my whole stay, my whole time here, which is, I think, of great value, because it lets you really dive into a case. You know, when you do international arbitration, cases are usually big and complex, and having the opportunity and the time to really focus on the case, go into all the details and get to know it properly is very valuable, and lets you grow as a professional. I've heard, and I know that some other places could be different, in the sense that they assign you to several cases and you do maybe more superficial work in each one of them. And you know, it's a different style. It also has its perks, but I would say that I prefer this other approach. And it also comes hand in hand with, you know, your importance in the case of your role. It allows you to play a more active role, and depending, of course, on your experience and other factors, you might be able to help in crucial aspects of the case, like drafting, like preparing cross-examination questions, like meeting with the client, meeting with experts, meeting with witnesses, and really diving into the subject matter. And that would be the second thing. Now, the third thing that I really enjoy about this place would be the fact that there's flexibility in many aspects. There's not only flexibility in where you work from, to a certain extent, but also in how you do things. I also think that this goes hand in hand with the fact that we're a smaller team of people who trust one another, and who know that as long as things are done properly, you know, each person has their own way of doing them. And this is definitely the third thing that I would say I very much enjoy about Chaffetz. Lindsay.
This is great. Sounds like you're both happy with your positions, and different firms offer different things, and there's always room for everything. Sounds like there's flexibility. There's a lot of work. Sounds like you're both busy, but it sounds like it's work that you enjoy, and that keeps you moving forward. And I liked how Ljubica defined it, intellectually challenging, that she likes that. Not every day is always different. You're not doing the same thing, and you just keep growing into, you know, your professional persona. So this is really great. So we're at the end of our questions. We're ready for the networking rooms, but just before we go, I just have to make a joke, because I promised, I already told Ljubica I was gonna do it. Ljubica, you work at WilmerHale, and we just want to know, how often do you see Gary Bourne in the office?
Well, that depends how often I come to the office and how often Gary comes to the office. But I would say, yeah, he's quite often here. And we do see him wandering the floors. Despite being super busy, he also finds time for to stand with you and you know, catch up. So yeah, he's present. He's not always traveling.
Sounds great. I was recently at the ICC headquarters in Paris, and he walked in for a hearing apparently, and he was attacked by students who were visiting because everybody wanted a picture with him. So I just wanted to make this joke because you work with the one and only Gary Bourne. But all right, so that's a wrap. We're at the end of our questions. And now we are ready for our networking rooms.
Let me just say, before we wrap up and we move to networking, thank you all very much on behalf of Careers in Arbitration, and please do stay tuned to the feed for further announcements.